So hello. I hope that you are enjoying the conference so far. How was it? Good? Good, fantastic. So let's start with a quick survey. Stand up if you have deployed at least once in your career some code in production. Come on, stand up. Don't be lazy. Fantastic. So stay up. Great. Stay up if at least once in your career you roll back or you fast forward very quickly a version of your application. Perfect. So look around the room. Okay, so this talk we are going to solve it. Okay? Fantastic. So those are the kind of problems that are, for front-end and back-end developers, quite normal. And with micro-frontedns, that is a distributed system on the front end, those are things that are happening every single day, and it's normal. Spoke with hundreds of customers from Australia to Silicon Valley, trying to help them and listening what kind of challenges they're facing. And this one is one of the major ones. So now, let's go ahead playing some games. So if you if you scan this QR code, you will find yourself in something like that. I'm not a designer, okay, and I'm not John. But this is a free template you can download on the web. So I just take it, remove some CSS because I'm not, for me it's black magic, so I have no clue how it works. But this one is an application that is loaded inside Module Federation. If you're familiar, it's a Webpack plugin that allows you to load a micro-frontend and have a decent developer experience. Now, when I have to deploy a new version, 99% of the time, what I hear from people is that they go in their CI/CD or continuous deployment, doesn't matter. They just do a big bang deployment. And we learned in the hard way, especially in the microservice world, that's not enough. Because if you create loosely coupled entities, in this case micro-frontends, that has to work together in a system, you can have tens of them in the same view, you might risk that you compromise the user experience. That is exactly what we are fading away. So now, imagine for a second, I see that my internet connection dropped. Perfect, that is exactly what I need. Fantastic. So we will imagine later on. Hopefully we'll come back. So now imagine for a second that you have your CI/CD that is working, and in order to roll out a new front end, no matter what it is, micro-frontend or not, you have an API that allows you to set up something like this. Oh, fantastic. Okay. It won't be live. Imagine that. So you have an API that allows you to, let's say, deploy a new front end where you define what is the URL of the new front end, the version, and wherever. But most importantly, you can also decide the deployment strategy. So in the deployment strategy, you have like a bunch of options potentially that you can say, I want to do, I don't know, a linear increment of 10% every minute, stuff like that. That will allow you to de-risk the deployment of your applications. Despite this a single-page application, Fabio did a fantastic talk covering all the different architectures that you have on the front end. Imagine any of them that you can deploy in that way. So finally, you don't need anymore to, let's say, cross your fingers and hope that everything goes fine, or someone else will find your bugs. You can have observability and your dashboard in front of you while you are deploying something. How can we do that? We will discover in this talk. So who am I? My name is Luca. I'm a principal serverless specialist. I'm based in London. And I'm an international speaker and books author. And it's quite a lot of fun doing this kind of activities.
Hey, Luca, would you like an hotspot?
No, don't worry. That's
okay, fine. If you need it, we have it.
So this is how usually, when we deploy a single-page application, how it looks like, right? So we have an artifact, usually one or multiple JavaScript files, depends how you structure that. You have an HTML entry point, you have few CSS, depends what you use. But then when you go in production, you just go in production and that's it. But with micro-frontends is different, right? So you have like multiple teams that have multiple potential HTML files, or just one or none. You have JavaScript, a lot of JavaScript, you have CSS, and so on. And this is complicated. It's not as easy as it was before, especially for client-side rendering. The main problem I realized in 2021 was micro-frontends currently lack of an opinionated way to do discovery and delivery. And that's exactly the same problem we solved many years ago with microservices. So let's try to look the different examples that usually you find in GitHub or on web. Vast majority of the time, if you're looking for client-side rendering frameworks that are doing micro-frontend, like single SPA, you see something like that. So you have like an import map where it could be an import map, it could be made with System.js, where you have like a bunch of imports that then will take care to load your micro-frontends, and off you go, you have your system up and running. Or you have emoji federation, a definition of your Webpack plugin that allows you to set up specific chunks, or remote, like they call it. And every remote represents an entry point that has is list of chunks, of JavaScript chunks that are loaded. That's fine. It's quite normal and quite common. The problem is when you work in, let's say, enterprise applications, vast majority of the time you work multi-environment. And vast majority of the time you want to do some testing, let's say, ephemeral environment potentially. And that is a challenge. So what can we do about dynamic import? So how can we have an application shell, usually is the first thing that is loaded in a micro-frontends application, that will remain there for the entire user session, and starts to load a specific micro-frontend? How can we instruct that to load the right one? That's the question. When I started to look about solutions, the first thing that bubbles in my mind is, okay, let's see how others are solving that, right? And the thing that I immediately thought about is the discovery pattern. That is quite common on microservices. You don't call straight the IP of a microservice. You call a service that tells you, or a registry in this case, where I can find my microservice. Why that? Because suddenly I can evolve my microservice in the way that I want. As long as the ID remains the same, I can do whatever I want as a team. That is exactly the pattern that you want to have inside your organization in distributed systems. But that opens up to other common challenges we could solve in micro-frontends. So we want to discover new versions. We want also to de-risk the deployment, because we know that we cannot afford to lose millions of customers because we introduce a bug in our application. And also, what happens if my JavaScript file or HTML entry point of micro-frontends is not available? I need to have a fallback. Maybe I generate that dynamically. I want to have something that is stale, and I'm sure that it will be available. On top of that is, if you think about that, I need to retrieve an endpoint for an entry point for a micro-frontend that is remote. That means I can start to shape traffic. That's the beauty of that. Because nowadays we have a lot of things that are happening in our cloud providers or on-prem or wherever you are, let's say, developing your application. You can handle the traffic patterns in the way that you want. A couple of examples. Blue-green deployment. So I start to deploy, we have catalog version 1.2.1 that is available 100% to our customers. We deploy a new version, 1.4.0, and then suddenly our developers can start to work and test the new version in production without others knowing that exists. Fantastic. When we are happy with that, we redirect all the traffic towards the new version. Simple, easy, elegant. Next one, canary releases. Similar thing, but this time we provide a certain percentage of live traffic towards the new version. And I've done this in the past in other companies, and it's working pretty nicely and creates a very nice behavior for developers, that they start to feel the safe net, and they start to deploy more often and regularly, more than doing that few times per month maybe, Because now they can say, oh, I just impact 5% of the traffic. And if you want to go even more granular, you can select the country or other things. So you can really go granular in the way that you want. And this is not branching code like you would do with feature flags or other stuff. It's literally happening when the request comes in, and then you return the right version. So what I did in 2022, January 2022, is starting a working group. And I said, okay, so it cannot be just me thinking about that, because I'm sure everyone, as you have seen, have similar problems. So what I did, I just call my friend Joel, that is the creator of Single SPA, Zach, the creator of Module Federation, and Matteo, that is a colleague of mine and also the creator of Open Components. Those three are probably the major micro-frontends frameworks out there. And we started to think together and collaboratively come up with a solution for solving the problems that we just have seen. So how to implement all the features that we described inside an application shell. So we started to rumble a few ideas. At the beginning, we started to think about plugins and other things. And I said, listen, guys, we need to find a way that is completely agnostic. I don't want to bound to a framework. I don't want to bound to a specific technology. I want that everyone in the world can take our work and implement in wherever developer experience they want to embed. And that's why we decided to go with the JSON schema. So this JSON schema that seems very simple, because it is, and we will see in a second what it does, is the way how we are trying to have all the micro-frontends frameworks, let's say, following as a specification. And it works in this way. So the first thing, you have a project that is, in this case, at AWS project Z, and then you have a type of micro-frontend, in this case, the catalog. So that is the unique identifier of that micro-frontend. Then you have the micro-frontend URL. So in this case, is aws-catalog.js, that is the entry point. You can have a fallback, maybe in another CDN if you want to, if you work with a multi-CDN strategy. That is another way to do that. You have a bunch of metadata that are integrity and version. We thought that those are the most common one that we have seen in all the use cases that we analyzed. And then we have extras, because in reality, at the beginning of the process, we started to say, okay, we wanted to cover all these nice features. The problem we realized very quickly is that if we are listening just to ourselves, we are not listening to you, that you have real problem in the trenches. We want to embed this problem inside the schema, but we cannot do that if we do constant breaking changes. Therefore, we started to have a safe net in this case, that is the extras, that allows us to say, okay, in Module Federation, I want to load my micro-frontend, and I want to load at the same time all the dependencies. And therefore, I can have Module Federation consumed by and an array of other dependencies I need to load. So I can instruct my application shell to handle in that way. Now, the other thing that I was quite passionate is we need to figure out a way to implement this stuff. Because blue-green deployment, canary releases are practices that or so many organizations I spoke with, they are struggling, or they create their own version. And it's just an undifferentiating heavy lifting that doesn't have to be developed every single time. So probably you didn't spot it before, but it was an array that described a specific micro-frontend. So in this case, we have my account that is an array of micro-frontends, or versions in this case. And therefore, because it's an array, we can also add a new field that is optional, that is a deployment. And this deployment has two specific other fields. The traffic, so 30% of traffic goes in this version, and also potentially a default. So for any given reason, if I cannot find the specific version, I have a default to fall back. So an additional fallback of the fallback, if you want. I describe, let's say, back in the days in 2019, during reInvent, when I was a customer, was working for a company that probably in Italy is well known. It's called The Zone, and there we implemented this logic of canary releases at the edge, using Lambda at the edge, because we were working a lot with AWS. So if you're interested, there was a link at the bottom of this slide. So what are the benefits of this approach? First of all, if you use JSON, it works front-end and back-end. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, but on front-end, how can it work, Luca? So there is a guy in this room that is my spare partner and soundboard when I have crazy ideas on front end. And usually, you know, it's better than me in math. And he created like this, like after talking with him about this specific idea that I had back in 2021. And he sent me the picture, so I kept the picture because it was amazing. And basically, after to a certain threshold, if you're running everything on the front end, you will arrive to have a separation of 30/70, for instance, of your canary release, if we take that. Obviously, is it the safest way to handle that? Probably not. So anyway, it could work. It's not very opinionated. We're using JSON is probably the basic thing that we could think about, apart YAML that I think it was Yanni was talking about YAML before. It's extensible. You want to take that schema and put inside your, I don't know, configuration API that you use for at the beginning for loading your single page application or micro-frontends, do it. We are not asking for doing a specific call for that. You can embed in wherever you want. But there are some pitfalls. First of all, you must get this configuration before load anything else. So if you think about the waterfall of your in your browser would look like application shells is loaded the code for that, make the call to this service or configuration, and then you can start to load the micro-frontend. So you don't embed anything inside the code. That, let's say, a pitfall, but also a benefit. It might be very loose. So as you have seen, we weren't very prescriptive. We just provide the bare minimum needed for handle these kind of things. And for security and performance, it's better to implement on the backend. So you just call an endpoint, and then you receive back which micro-frontend to use. Now, in that case, you can have an exact separation of how many people are going to a version or another one. If you want to apply any other logic, could be, I don't know, geolocalization or, I don't know, segmentation based on users, stuff like that. You can do that. So this is public, it's available, and you can add issues you want to contribute, just open an issue, and it's available there. It's available for a while. We had a couple of issues. We try to reply with our point of view. The next thing that probably we are going to start look into in the last call that we had was thinking about how we can, let's say, extend in a smart way also on server-side rendering, because it could work out of the box today with server-side rendering, but we want to explore even more. Consider we so far we don't have a clear winner on implementing micro-frontends and server-side rendering together. And we want obviously to apply all the learnings from this experience. But then the question is the next one: how can we facilitate the adoption? Because that's the reality. It's all fancy and dandy, but if I need to rebuild it, it's painful. So logically speaking, what we want to do is this. So we want to have an application shell that is loaded, and then we call like micro-frontend discovery service that is over there, that's storing in a database all the information needed for my micro-frontends, and knowing what I need to release, and just retrieve which version I need to load, and off you go. You have your configuration with the micro-frontends that are available for that specific user, country, whatever. That part here is undifferentiating heavy lifting. Is exactly the same thing that we can abstract away, and you just use it. Why not? So with a bunch of other colleagues, we decided to create a front-end discovery service that is completely open source. You can fork it, you can use for whatever purpose you want. You can extend it, all the code is available there, and it's just very simple service that you can deploy in your AWS account today, and you have a couple of set of APIs, and we will see in a second what they do. But the beauty of this is that you can just use it and start to do exactly what I described here with the schema that I described right here, and use inside your application. The beauty of that is that, as you can see, we didn't say micro-frontend discovery service. We said front-end discovery service, because if you want to work with a single page application and apply canary release and blue-green deployment, you can do that on the edge. And the example will be ready next week for that. So how does it work? This is let's say the architecture. It's all serverless, and there is a reason because we wanted to use this. We wanted to use serverless because you pay for what you use. And therefore, in this case, so imagine, for instance, you have this, let's say, deployed inside your dev account or staging account. Now, suddenly, on average, a developer works 6-7 hours per day, give or take, in those accounts during weekdays. So it means that you have a lot of hours that you don't do anything, so you don't pay. That's the main thing. And also, it can scale very nicely, especially if we started to think, let's say, large enterprises that has, let's say, patterns that are quite particular, spiky vast majority of the time. So it's composed in two areas. The first one is the admin user area, where that is a set of APIs dedicated for your CI/CD. We wanted a way to not disrupt your way to deploy your code. We wanted a way that allows you to just plug it and start to use it. And therefore, every endpoint is just an API away. So you just call an API for setting your deployment strategy. Now, the interesting part of this, as you can see, there are multiple DynamoDB tables that are the blue icons if you're not familiar with AWS, because we are doing an optimization on the read side for making the response of your request from the front end extremely fast. The way how we access the table called Consumer View Store is designed in a way that you can send a bunch of information. We store in multiple tables, and then there is the stream Lambda that takes care of updating the Consumer View Store in a way that is extremely fast to access, and therefore there isn't, let's say, queries that are also, if you're growing the traffic or if you're growing the number of micro-frontends there, that will kill your traffic or will slow down your response. So the beauty of this approach for me are several. The first one is if you go on the website in the one that I described before, so you can go in the GitHub and just deploy inside your AWS account with one click. What it does is basically allowing you to have a CloudFormation template, and opening your console, you just set a bunch of fields, then you click deploy, boom, you have your APIs stored in a matter of minutes. So you don't have to do anything else since then. You just need to consume the APIs in your CI/CD and on your client side. The second one that I'm quite passionate, should work for everything. And that's what we aim for. Yes, there is probably, not being too opinionated, force you to do a bit of plumbing, but it's not too complicated. As you will see in the examples folder in that repository, that is very, very easy to plug this kind of solution, especially on the client side. You're going to receive a list of micro-frontends, and then you have the right version there, the fallback, and all the other information that are needed to you for operating this thing properly. It can integrate in every CI/CD. As I said before, I don't want to disrupt your CI/CD. I want that you use exactly the tool that you're using today, because I know how complicated and sometimes painful it is changing habits inside in a team or in an organization, and therefore it has to be pluggable and has to be easy to focus on. It's technology agnostic in terms that I don't want to, let's say, use something that is only AWS. Potentially, you can rebuild this, taking like copying and pasting code or forking what we have done and use in whatever other environment, maybe on-prem. It's up to you how you want to handle that. What we are trying to do is helping you to save your customers the pain to a bad deployment. That could happen. You have seen before, the survey was for that reason. It could happen. And it's not, let's say, because we are a human being. It happened to me, it happened to you, it happened to everyone. And it's going to happen again and again and again. Therefore, let's acknowledge that as our CTO usually say, everything's always failing. Something could fail. So let's try to make our job meaningful, to simplify our life and not have a strong impact towards our user base. It's open source. As I said, it's on GitHub. Do whatever you feel useful for your organization to use that. The other cool thing is that I work behind the scene for talking with other, let's say, people in the micro-frontends community, and luckily I'm in a position that I can reach quite a few people very quickly, and therefore we started to say, okay, can we use this as a standard? Can we really make this a normal thing that every micro-frontend framework can embrace? And we are, let's say, we are ramping up few discussion with a few of them, and I think we are heading towards the right direction at the moment. For now, I'm talking mainly with client-side rendering, let's say frameworks. Then in the future, we will cover more. But that is pretty cool. The other cool thing that when I started to pitch to few customers this solution, is that they already see this to embed inside the developer experience because it's very transparent. It doesn't require too much effort for them, and it's literally changing let's say, the deployment of their artifacts in a way that is adding a request or a curl command or vget, wherever you want, for describing how you want to deploy your micro-frontends or front-end. So let's try to recap what we have seen today. So first of all, a discoverability pattern allow you to unleash new opportunities, because finally it doesn't matter anymore if you work multi-environment. It doesn't matter anymore if you have a specific framework. You can do wherever you need, because you decouple basically the way how you deploy your application shell and all the rest of the micro-frontends. That is exactly where you want to be organizationally speaking. Second thing is the discoverability can improve, let's say, your deployment strategy. That is another great thing, because if before we were bounded to only a possibility, the vast majority of the time from what I have heard in the community was feature flags that requires you to fork your code, create tests for every single part, and you can, instead of, let's say, have just that mechanism, you can have an additional mechanism. That could be this one. It's never an or, but it's an and. And that's the beauty of this approach for trying to make it transparent. If you want to try out, that is the URL, and any feedback, more than happy to discuss. Just drop me an email or send me a tweet message or LinkedIn, wherever, and you will be able to get whatever, let's say, discussion you have in mind and how to evolve this thing. Hope that you enjoyed the talk and was useful, and I hope to see you around. I'm here for the rest of the day if you have any question, but now if I think we have some time for questions, it would be great to answer any question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any questions in the room? Over there.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
I kind of two questions, but it's more like curiosities. It's like, have you ever had a problem with like a browser caching? That's the first question. And the second question is about, what about SSR, if you ever, like if it's supported?
That's valid. So let's start with the browser. So what's your take? So the challenge that you have is the browser will cache for a certain amount of time based on the, let's say, header that you pass the specific version. That's the challenge. The URL, okay. So there are several ways that you can solve that. So for instance, you can have a Lambda at the edge that is operating at the viewer request and response. In that case, it will be always it. It won't be cached because you operate before the cache. So also if you're using a single page application, that Lambda will be loaded. So you can change the request in a way to push towards one version or another one. So that will solve the problem of single page application, will solve the problem of static site generator, will solve the problem of even, that is a request from a couple of customers, the application shell. Because they said, oh, it's so fantastic. It works for micro-frontends. What about the application shell? That probably is the most critical one. And we got that covered. That's a valid point. Sorry, the second one was? Server-side rendering. So how does it work with server-side rendering? So today, it would work it's not a big deal. The only thing is, it's not the client that is calling this endpoint or this service. It would be the server that is doing the server-side rendering part that is calling the API. You receive a token that is associated to a specific user that you will bound to your token, and basically you will send back to the client. So when there is the next request, you have a user underscore token parameter that contains an ID that will be bounded to your user, and you can find the bucketing mechanism that we have done, and we try to encapsulate in a way that you will allow to change, because obviously this is one way to do bucketing of your user, but you can create something more complex, maybe by country or by type of user. You say only the admin user should see that specific version of Micro-frontedns, or wherever you have in mind. We try to stay, for this very moment we just launched, we started to take a step back and listen what people are looking for. We already have a couple of new ideas that are bubbling currently inside the team for understanding that part, but basically the call is coming directly from your server that is doing the server-side rendering towards this service that will operate. At the end, it's just a call, so it's nothing too crazy, and you have just the ID that allows you to bucket in, because the thing that we try to implement is the moment that you enter in a bucket, you will remain in that bucket despite you are authenticated or not. That was one condition that we had. Because it's associated to a cookie that we generate, or you can take the user token and implement inside your cookie. That is fine either way, and it won't be a problem. And that ID will remain bounded to a specific version. So the moment that you are raising up the traffic towards multiple users, you will be able to maintain the same version. So the only way that the user entering a new bucket will see the previous version is because you stop the deployment. And therefore, we do an immediate rollback on everything, and you move from, I don't know, version 1.2 to you're moving to version 1.4. You roll back, everyone goes back to 1.2 immediately, because that's the whole point, right? We didn't create, for instance, one thing that was requested a couple of times is the UI. Why you don't have a UI? Because the reality is every customer, and many of them at least, have an opinionated way for handling that, and rightly so. And they have their own way that sometimes could be a cab team that is deciding when you can deploy and when you cannot deploy. There are other customers using continuous deployment. Let's say there is a variety of things that we cannot foresee up front. And therefore, we want to provide, let's say, the undifferentiating heavy lifting, and then leave the pluggability into your ecosystem to you that you know better than us. That's currently the reasoning. I don't want to say it would be forever and ever in that way, but we really, at the beginning, we want more listening than being opinionated. Because this part here is probably the simpler one. Then everything else, you start the complication, but we need to take certain decisions and be more opinionated, and we want to make sure that we have data points that are guiding us towards the right path.
Looks like you have Wi-Fi now. You want to try your demo?
Do I have it? Ooh, super exciting. So imagine that this one is not Postman, but is your CI. And I've deployed in my CI/CD this specific version that is catalog 2.0. So now, if everything goes fine, and I think it's not going, because knowing myself how lucky I am that it's going to crash everything. Let me send it. Then it's unauthorized. That's what I bet. Or the internet connection doesn't even respond back. But basically, after a while, if it works, it doesn't. You will have a response from this endpoint that will basically tell you that everything goes fine. So you will start to have a linear 10% every minute of increment of traffic towards a new version. So that basically, it means that in 10 minutes you deploy everything. 10 minutes is enough for handling, could not get a response. So despite it, there is a connection, doesn't work. But anyway, you will have like a response that with an ID, that is the deployment ID, that allows you also to do the rollback. So with that deployment ID, you can call another API, say, sorry, but there was a fault, and therefore you go back. It's unfortunate that I cannot show you, but again, it's very easy. Next time, probably, I will record the video. But thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.